She enters wrong hotel room. Never thought inside waits lonely millionaire CEO. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. It was late evening in downtown Chicago. The luxurious Grand River Hotel glowed with chandeliers and marble floors, polished to perfection. Guests in elegant gowns and sharp suits passed through the lobby, their laughter echoing against the high ceilings. But in the middle of all that grandeur, a young woman hurried through the entrance, clutching her worn-out handbag against her chest. Her name was Emily Carter. She was 24, a college student who worked part-time shifts to keep up with tuition and help her younger brother back home. Her shoes were scuffed, her blouse slightly wrinkled, and her tired eyes betrayed the long hours she had already worked that day. To the hotel staff and glamorous guests, she was invisible. To her, this world of crystal chandeliers and champagne flutes felt like a universe away from her own reality. Emily was not supposed to be here tonight. She had agreed to meet a friend to drop off some borrowed notes for an upcoming exam. But when she arrived, her phone buzzed with a message that her friend was running late. Exhausted, Emily asked the front desk for a quiet place where she could wait and maybe review her sketchbook. A distracted receptionist, juggling too many calls, handed her a room key without checking twice. Clutching the key card, Emily stepped into the golden elevator, her heart pounding. She had never been inside a five-star hotel room before. Curiosity and nervousness tangled in her chest. She whispered to herself, "Just 10 minutes, then I will leave." The elevator doors slid open onto the 22nd floor. Plush carpets muffled her steps as she followed the number printed on the key card. She hesitated, then slid the key into the lock. The door clicked open. Emily pushed it gently and stepped inside. The room was dimly lit, the curtains half drawn against the glittering skyline. At first, she thought it was empty. Then she froze. A man sat in the armchair by the window, tall and composed, a half-empty glass of whiskey in his hand. He turned his head slowly, his sharp eyes catching the light. The tension in the air was immediate. His suit jacket rested on the back of the chair, his tie loosened, but his presence radiated quiet authority. Emily's breath caught. This was not the empty waiting room she had imagined. She had walked straight into someone's private space. I am so sorry," she stammered, backing toward the door, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. "They gave me this key downstairs. I must have made a mistake." The man did not move. He studied her with a mixture of curiosity and disbelief, as if he could not decide whether to dismiss her or stop her. His voice, when it finally came, was deep and calm, yet edged with something unspoken. "Most people knock before entering a stranger's room," he said. Emily swallowed hard. She wanted to explain, to apologize again, but her words tangled in her throat. She had no idea she had just stepped into the life of Adrian Blackwell, a billionaire CEO whose name graced financial headlines and magazine covers, yet in this quiet, lonely room, he looked nothing like the untouchable man the world admired. And Emily, with her wrinkled blouse and worn-out shoes, had no idea that her small mistake tonight would change both of their lives forever. Emily's hand trembled on the doorknob, her mind racing for an escape. The stranger's eyes, sharp and unreadable, pinned her in place. She felt her pulse beating against her throat. "I really am sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking under the weight of the silence. "The receptionist must have left you with the wrong key," the man finished, his tone calm but laced with suspicion. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "How convenient." Emily blinked, stunned. His words struck her like an accusation. She shook her head quickly. "No, it was a mistake. I swear I do not belong here. I was just waiting for a friend." "Waitress." He studied her, his gaze lingering on the worn-out straps of her handbag, the faint ink stains on her fingers from her sketchbook, the exhaustion in her posture. Something about her was different from the polished, jeweled women who usually crossed his path. "Most people who end up in this room," he said slowly, "are either invited or desperate." Emily flinched. She had been judged before for her thrift store clothes, for her student loans, for the fact that she worked in diners instead of attending parties. But hearing it from this stranger, in this glittering hotel room, cut deeper. "I am not desperate," she replied firmly, surprising herself with the strength in her voice. "I am tired, maybe a little lost, but not desperate." The man tilted his head, a faint shadow of curiosity flickering in his expression. He had expected her to crumble under the weight of his words. Instead, she stood straighter, her chin lifting as if she had drawn an invisible line between them. Silence stretched in the room, broken only by the faint hum of the city outside the window. Emily clutched her bag tighter, inching toward the door. "I will go," she said quietly. "Sorry for disturbing you." She reached for the handle, but his voice stopped her again. "Wait." She froze, turning back slowly. He rose from the armchair with measured steps, setting his glass on the table. Even without his jacket, he carried himself with authority. He looked no older than his early 30s, but his eyes carried years of solitude. "You did not knock," he said, his tone softer now. "You just walked in. Why?" Emily swallowed. "Because I thought the room was empty, because I trusted the key they gave me." "Trust," he repeated, almost to himself. "That is dangerous." Dular. For a brief second, she saw something crack in his mask. Loneliness, raw and unguarded, slipped through. Then he straightened, shielding it again. "You should be more careful," he said finally. Emily hesitated. 1,000 questions hovered on her lips. Who was this man, really? Why did his voice sound more tired than angry? But instinct urged her to leave before she became more entangled. "Good night," she murmured, and stepped out into the hallway. The door closed behind her with a soft click, but her heart still pounded. She leaned against the wall, trying to catch her breath. What had just happened? She told herself it was over, that she would never see him again. Just a stranger in a hotel room. Just an embarrassing mistake. Yet, as she walked back toward the elevator, she could still feel the weight of his gaze following her. As if the wrong door had opened more than just a room. And behind that door, Adrian Blackwell remained by the window, staring into the night, unsettled in a way he had not felt in years. The next morning, sunlight poured into the city, bouncing off the glass towers and flooding the busy streets below. Emily hurried through the revolving doors of the Grand River Hotel, clutching her small shoulder bag. Her part-time shift started early, and she was already running behind. She had not slept much, replaying the awkward encounter in her head all night. The stranger's piercing gaze, his cutting words, and the flicker of loneliness she thought she had seen haunted her thoughts, like a shadow she could not shake. In the staff lounge, she tied on her apron and pulled her hair into a messy ponytail. Her coworkers joked and gossiped around her, but Emily kept quiet. She had always been the kind who blended into the background, doing her work without fuss. Today, however, her nerves buzzed. She prayed she would not run into him again. After all, the hotel hosted hundreds of guests. What were the chances that their paths would cross once more? Fate, however, seemed determined to remind her of the mistake she had made. Carrying a tray of coffee and pastries into the executive dining area, Emily froze when she recognized him sitting at the head of a long, polished table. Adrian Blackwell, though she still did not know his name, looked nothing like the lonely man in the dim hotel room the night before. Surrounded by assistants in suits and managers clutching files, he commanded the space with quiet authority. His crisp navy suit was flawless, his tie perfectly knotted, and every word he spoke carried weight. Emily lowered her eyes quickly, focusing on the tray in her hands. She set the coffee down in front of one of the executives, willing herself invisible, but her presence did not go unnoticed. Adrian's gaze flickered across the room and landed on her. For the briefest second, recognition flared in his eyes. The corner of his mouth twitched as if he were fighting a smile or a memory. Emily's cheeks burned. She hurried through her task and back toward the door. But his voice cut through the chatter. "You," he said simply. The room fell silent. Every head turned toward her. Emily froze. "Yes, sir?" Her voice was barely audible. Adrian leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "You work here?" She nodded quickly. "Yes, just part-time. I am sorry for last night. It was a mistake. It will not happen again." A ripple of curiosity moved through the executives, though no one dared to speak. Adrian's gaze lingered on her, sharp and assessing. Then, with a dismissive wave of his hand, he turned back to the meeting. "You may go," he said. Emily's chest tightened. She dipped her head, muttered a quiet thank you, and hurried out, the heat of humiliation rising in her throat. In the hallway, she leaned against the wall, her hands trembling. She told herself again that it was just bad luck. He would forget her soon enough. But deep inside, she wondered if he already knew her better than she wanted him to. Inside the dining room, Adrian continued the meeting, his face composed. Yet his thoughts lingered on the girl with the ink-stained fingers and tired eyes who had stumbled into his solitude. She was nothing like the polished executives or the women who tried to impress him at charity galas. She had looked him in the eye and refused to crumble. And for reasons he could not explain, Adrian Blackwell, Billionaire CEO, found himself unsettled by the thought that perhaps she had walked into his life for more than just a mistake. That evening, Emily stayed late after her shift, helping clean up the ballroom where a corporate dinner had just ended. The staff moved quickly, stacking chairs, clearing dishes, and folding linen. Emily carried a tray of empty glasses toward the service elevator, her arms aching from the long day. She could not shake the memory of the morning meeting. The way Adrian Blackwell had called her out in front of everyone still stung, though she had told herself it was nothing. To him, she was a forgettable face among thousands of employees. To her, he was a reminder of the thin, unbreakable wall between their worlds. The service elevator dinged open, and she stepped inside, adjusting her load. Just as the doors began to close, a hand stopped them. Emily's eyes widened when Adrian himself stepped in. His tie was loosened, his jacket draped over his arm. He looked less like the commanding executive she had seen at breakfast, and more like the solitary figure she had stumbled upon the night before. For a moment, neither spoke. The hum of the elevator filled the silence as it descended. Emily shifted uncomfortably, staring at the buttons. "You work too late," Adrian said finally, his tone more conversational than commanding. Emily glanced at him, unsure how to respond. "The shifts are long. It helps pay tuition." His brows lifted slightly. "Tuition? I am in my last year of college," she admitted, "studying art. Every hour counts." Adrian studied her face, as if weighing her honesty. "Art," he repeated, the word foreign on his tongue. "That does not sound very practical." Emily let out a small, humorless laugh. "Practical is not the point. It is what I love. Even if it means working 2 jobs and skipping sleep." Something flickered in his eyes. She spoke with a conviction he rarely saw in boardrooms, where people only spoke of profit and efficiency. Before he could say more, the elevator stopped abruptly on the wrong floor, the doors sliding open. Confused, Emily stepped out, thinking it was her stop. But as she glanced around, she realized this was not the service hallway. This was another private floor, reserved for executives and guests. The elevator doors closed behind her, trapping Adrian on the same floor. Emily panicked slightly. "I am sorry. I must have pressed the wrong button. I will find the stairs." "Wait," Adrian said, his voice low but firm. "Come with me." She hesitated. "I cannot. I should not even be here." But he had already started walking toward a nearby lounge. And against her better judgment, she followed. The room was quiet, furnished with leather chairs and soft lighting. Adrian set his jacket down and motioned for her to sit. Reluctantly, Emily lowered herself into a chair across from him, clutching her bag like a shield. "You said you study art," he began, his tone softer now. "Show me." Her eyes widened. "Show you? You carry that sketchbook everywhere," he said matter-of-factly. "I noticed last night." Emily blinked, surprised that he had paid attention to such a small detail. Slowly, she pulled the worn sketchbook from her bag and opened it. Pages of pencil drawings spilled across the table street corners, faces of strangers, fleeting moments captured in quick strokes. Adrian leaned forward, studying them. His expression shifted, the cool mask slipping for a moment. "You see people differently," he murmured. Emily felt her cheeks flush. "I just draw what others overlook." "See." Their eyes met across the table, and for the first time, the air between them was not filled with judgment or misunderstanding, but with something unspoken, fragile, and new. Neither of them realized it yet. But the mistake of a wrong door and a wrong elevator had just forced them into a space where neither could hide. For days after that quiet encounter in the executive lounge, Emily tried to return to her normal rhythm. She worked her shifts, attended her classes, and stayed up late finishing assignments. Yet her mind kept drifting back to that moment when Adrian Blackwell had leaned over her sketchbook, his guarded expression softening as he studied her drawings. It had been the first time she saw the billionaire not as a cold stranger in a hotel room or a ruthless executive at a board meeting, but as a man capable of curiosity, maybe even admiration. She convinced herself it was nothing. He had his world, and she had hers. Their paths had crossed by accident, and accidents did not last. Still, fate had its way of weaving them back together. One rainy afternoon, Emily was sent to deliver refreshments to a small private event hosted on the hotel's rooftop garden, now enclosed for the season. The storm outside rumbled, while rain lashed against the glass walls. Balancing a tray of tea and sandwiches, Emily entered quietly, expecting a group of managers. Instead, she found Adrian standing alone near the window, his hands in his pockets as he looked out at the storm. Her breath caught, but she forced herself to move forward. She placed the tray on a table and tried to leave without a word. "Stay," his voice called softly behind her. Emily froze. "Sir, I should not interrupt." "You are not interrupting," Adrian replied, turning to face her. His suit was immaculate, but his eyes carried the same weary solitude she had glimpsed before. "Have tea with me." Her heart raced. "I cannot. I am staff." "Then consider this a request, not an order," he said, his voice lower now. "Sit." Against her instincts, Emily sat across from him. The storm outside rattled the windows, creating an odd cocoon of sound around them. He poured tea into 2 cups, his movements unhurried, almost careful. "I do not usually entertain company," Adrian admitted. "People come to me with agendas. But you walked into my life by mistake, and yet here you are again." Emily held her cup, unsure what to say. "It was not supposed to happen. I never wanted to intrude." "And yet," he said, a faint smile touching his lips, "you did." For the first time, his voice carried no edge, only a quiet warmth that unsettled her more than his coldness ever had. As they spoke, Emily found herself telling him things she rarely shared with anyone. Her dream of becoming an illustrator, her struggles to pay rent, her fear of failing her younger brother who depended on her. Adrian listened, his sharp gaze never wavering, as though each word mattered. When she finally stopped, embarrassed by how much she had revealed, she expected judgment. Instead, Adrian leaned back, his expression thoughtful. "You carry more strength than most people I know in boardrooms. They fight for profit. You fight for survival." The words lodged in her chest, heavy and strange. No one had ever described her life that way. Emily looked down, afraid of what her eyes might reveal. "I should go," she whispered, standing abruptly. Adrian did not stop her this time. He only watched as she left, her footsteps echoing against the quiet garden floor. Yet when Emily reached the hallway, she realized her heart was beating differently. Something had shifted between them. It was not just curiosity anymore. It was something deeper, something she was terrified to name. And back in the rooftop lounge, Adrian remained by the window, his reflection staring back at him. For years he had been surrounded by wealth, power, and influence, yet utterly alone. But the girl who entered his world by accident carried an honesty that no amount of fortune could buy. For the first time in years, Adrian Blackwell felt the storm outside mirrored the storm beginning inside his heart. The following week brought with it the annual Blackwell Enterprises Charity Gala, the most prestigious event the Grand River Hotel hosted each year. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers, velvet curtains, and golden centerpieces. Politicians, celebrities, and business magnates filled the room, their laughter blending with the sound of clinking champagne glasses. It was a night when reputations were made, deals were whispered, and appearances mattered more than truth. Emily had been assigned to work the event, carrying trays of hors d'oeuvres and refilling drinks. She had tried to trade shifts, desperate to avoid crossing paths with Adrian again, but no one would agree. As she tied her apron tighter, she whispered to herself, "Just keep your head down. Stay invisible." But fate, once again, had other plans. When she entered the ballroom, she saw him immediately. Adrian Blackwell stood near the stage, surrounded by city officials and high-profile donors. His black tuxedo fit him with effortless precision, his composure unshakable. Cameras flashed as reporters tried to capture his every move. He looked untouchable, every inch the billionaire CEO who ruled industries. Emily forced herself to look away, but her tray trembled slightly in her hands. As she weaved through the crowd, she could not stop herself from overhearing fragments of conversation. His name carried weight in every circle, and tonight he was the host, the center of gravity. Her path crossed his sooner than she wanted. As she leaned to refill a guest's glass, she glanced up and found Adrian's eyes on her. Recognition sparked, but his face remained neutral. He turned back to his conversation, giving no sign that he knew her beyond the role of a staff member. Emily's chest tightened. She reminded herself that this was the truth. He was a billionaire. She was a waitress. And whatever fragile connection they had in quiet corners of the hotel was nothing here. Then came the reveal. Midway through the evening, one of the donors clinked his glass and called for attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, our host for the evening, Mr. Adrian Blackwell." Applause filled the hall as Adrian stepped onto the stage. Emily froze, her tray forgotten in her hands. The man she had stumbled into by mistake, the lonely figure by the window, the one who had quietly studied her sketchbook, was not just any wealthy guest. He was the Adrian Blackwell, billionaire CEO whose name dominated headlines. Her breath caught as the pieces fell into place. His authority, his guarded loneliness, his presence in the hotel, none of it had been random. She had walked uninvited into the life of a man who could buy and sell entire cities. Adrian spoke with eloquence, thanking the guests, acknowledging donations, weaving in a vision of responsibility and leadership. The crowd adored him, their applause swelling with every line. But his eyes, for the briefest moment, swept the room until they found hers. Emily's heart pounded. She quickly looked away, retreating toward the back of the ballroom, her hands shaking. She needed air, space, anything to remind herself that she did not belong in his world. Outside in the staff corridor, she pressed her forehead against the cool wall. "What am I doing?" she whispered. She thought of her brother waiting for her support, of her student loans piling up, of her dream that felt further away than ever. She could not afford to be distracted by someone like him, but she could not erase the memory of his eyes seeking hers in a room full of power. Inside the ballroom, Adrian continued his speech, his voice steady. Yet in the back of his mind, he replayed the look on Emily's face when she realized who he was. Shock, fear, and something else, a wall rising between them. He knew he had to find a way to break it. Because for the first time in years, Adrian Blackwell had met someone who saw him as more than a name, more than a fortune, and he was not ready to let that slip away. Later that night, long after the applause had faded and the ballroom lights dimmed, Emily lingered near the service exit, waiting for her shift to officially end. Her body ached from hours of carrying trays, but her mind was heavier than her muscles. The image of Adrian on stage, commanding respect with every word, refused to leave her thoughts. She kept telling herself that it was foolish to feel anything. He was a billionaire CEO, a man who belonged to a world of chandeliers and red carpets. She was a student drowning in debt, clinging to part-time jobs and borrowed textbooks. The sound of footsteps pulled her from her thoughts. When she turned, she found him there. Adrian Blackwell stood in the dim corridor, his tuxedo jacket slung over his arm, his eyes fixed on her. "You left before I could speak with you," he said quietly. Emily's chest tightened. "I should not have even been in that ballroom except to work. You do not owe me words." Adrian stepped closer, his voice lower now, almost vulnerable. "You saw me before anyone else did, before the speeches, before the cameras. You saw me when I was just a man in a chair, and you did not flinch." "Audrey." Emily shook her head, retreating a step. "And now I know who you really are. That changes everything." "Does it?" Adrian asked. His eyes searched hers, steady but unguarded. "Because to me, you are the only person who has spoken to me without fear or an agenda. That changes more than you realize." Her throat tightened. Part of her wanted to believe him, but another part reminded her of the impossible distance between them. "I cannot fit into your world," she whispered. "I do not belong in it." Adrian's jaw tensed, but instead of arguing, he simply said, "Then let me show you mine. Not the one in the spotlight, not the headlines, the real one." For a moment, neither spoke. The rain tapped against the windows, a steady rhythm in the silence. Finally, Emily lowered her gaze. "Why me?" she asked, her voice almost breaking. Adrian's reply was simple, but it carried the weight of truth. "Because when you walked into the wrong room, it felt like for once, the right person had finally entered my life." Emily's breath caught, her defenses wavering. She turned away quickly, unable to let him see the tears threatening her eyes. She wanted to tell herself it was still just a mistake. But in her heart, she knew this mistake had already changed everything. The following morning, the hotel was buzzing with whispers. Emily noticed the stares the moment she stepped into the staff lounge. 2 waitresses looked her way, then quickly leaned in to whisper. A bellboy smirked as she passed. Confused, she hurried to her locker, only to find a folded newspaper tucked inside. Her heart dropped as she unfolded it. Splashed across the front page was a photograph from the charity gala. The image showed Adrian Blackwell speaking on stage, but at the edge of the frame stood Emily, carrying a tray, her eyes lifted toward him. The headline screamed, "Waitress caught capturing billionaire CEO's attention." Emily's stomach twisted. She skimmed the article, her cheeks burning with shame. The piece was filled with speculation that she was trying to seduce Adrian for money or status. Her name was not printed, but the gossip was vicious enough. By the time she reported for her shift, the damage had spread. Guests whispered when she entered the ballroom, and her supervisor pulled her aside. "You need to stay out of sight until this blows over. The hotel cannot risk a scandal." Emily's hands shook, "But I did nothing wrong. It was all a misunderstanding." Her supervisor sighed. "Misunderstandings do not make good headlines. Stories do." Tears burned in Emily's eyes as she backed away. She wanted to scream that she was innocent, but her voice felt trapped. That evening, as she left through the back corridor, a group of staff cornered her. "So, how much did he pay you?" one of them sneered. Another laughed. "Maybe she is climbing straight into the penthouse." Emily's face flushed. She pushed past them, humiliated. She could not believe. One mistake, one accidental room, had turned into a storm that threatened her job and dignity. But when she stepped outside into the night air, Adrian was there, waiting beside his car. "I read the article," he said, his voice steady but his eyes burning with anger. "They twisted everything." Emily shook her head, fighting tears. "It does not matter. People believe what they want to believe. And they will never believe someone like me could be seen with someone like you without an ulterior motive." Adrian stepped closer, his voice fierce now. "Then let me be clear. I will not allow anyone to drag your name through the mud. If they want to come after someone, they can come after me." She stared at him, stunned. "Why would you do that?" "Because this is not your burden to carry," Adrian replied. "You walked into the wrong room by accident, but I am choosing to walk into the fire for you on purpose." For the first time since the headlines broke, Emily felt the strength in his words reach her. The battle was no longer hers alone. 2 days later, the storm reached its peak. Reporters crowded the front of the Grand River Hotel, cameras flashing as they shouted questions about the mysterious waitress linked to Adrian Blackwell. Rumors spun out of control, and Emily felt her world collapsing. She had thought about quitting, disappearing quietly before the humiliation consumed her. But when she walked through the lobby that morning, she stopped in shock. Adrian Blackwell stood at the center of the marble floor, surrounded by journalists. His dark suit was sharp, his presence commanding, but his eyes burned with a determination she had never seen before. "Mr. Blackwell, is it true you have been secretly seeing this waitress?" one reporter demanded. Adrian raised a hand, silencing the room. His voice rang out, clear and unwavering. "Yes. And let me correct you right here. She is not some nameless waitress. Her name is Emily Carter. She is kind, hardworking, and far more honest than most people in this industry will ever be. If you want to write a headline, write this: The billionaire CEO has finally met someone who reminds him what it means to be human." The crowd erupted, cameras flashing wildly. Emily froze, her heart hammering in her chest. Then Adrian turned, his eyes locking on hers. He crossed the floor, ignoring the swarm of questions, until he stood right in front of her. For a moment, the world seemed to fall silent. "I am tired of hiding behind boardroom walls," he said softly, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "You walked into the wrong room that night, but you found the right place in my life." Emily, I do not care about status. I do not care about the noise outside. What I care about is you." Emily's eyes blurred with tears. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "Do you mean that?" Adrian reached into his pocket and pulled out a key card, the very same kind she had been handed by mistake weeks ago. He pressed it into her hand. "This time, it is not the wrong door. It is the right one. My home. Our home, if you will have me." Emotion surged through her chest. The humiliation, the whispers, the doubts, all of it faded under the weight of his words. "Yes," she breathed, her tears finally falling. "Yes, I will." "Hardiness." The reporters snapped photo after photo as Adrian wrapped his arm around her shoulders, shielding her from the storm of flashes. And as they walked out of the lobby together, Emily realized that the mistake that had once humiliated her had instead rewritten her destiny. She had entered the wrong hotel room, but in doing so, she had found the right heart.